Welcome to For Fresno. My name is Gordon, and this is a podcast about what the church is for, not what the church is against. And you can check out all our podcasts at forfresno.com. Today on the show, I have the pleasure of speaking with Alan Doswald. Alan is the founder and executive director of Evangelicals for Social Action, otherwise known as ESA. And one of their biggest ministries you might know is Love Inc. Alan grew up in Fresno. He graduated from Bullard High School and also graduated from Fresno State with a degree in sociology. For 12 years, he served with Youth for Christ at Edison High School until the Lord led him to ESA in 1982. He's married and he has 2 grown kids. Let's jump in with this conversation with Alan Doswald. Welcome to For Fresno. My name is Gordon, and today I just went out and found the oldest person I could find to talk. No, I'm just kidding. Today we've got a wonderful special guest, Alan Doswald, who is the founder and executive director of ESA, also known as Evangelicals for Social Action, and also known as Love Inc. And so, Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about ESA and Love Inc. and what you guys do.
Well, to start with, I became a Christian at 18, and when I was 19, I went into work for Youth for Christ because that's the group that led me to Christ. And I decided to start reading the Bible, and I took notes, and I saw what the Bible said we should be doing. And so I began to reach out to some lonely people, a Russian immigrant named Fred, a lonely person in a rest home named Florence. And then I started dreaming, what if every Christian had a Fred or a Florence or a Bob or a Randy, and those are other ones I ministered to. What if we all had some people? We could change this city. And so that's when the Lord called me to start a ministry called ESA, Evangelicals for Social Action. 4 years later, we started Love Inc. as a ministry under ESA, and that means love in the name of Christ. And we mobilize Christians and churches to transform lives and communities in the name of Christ. And our foundational scripture is found in James 2:14 through 17. It says, "What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothing and daily food. If one of you says to him, 'Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead."
Yeah.
That's why we're called Evangelicals for Social Action.
Yeah, that's great. And so you became a Christian, you said, at 18, and you met people throughout and actually did what the Bible said as you were taking notes. That just sounds so simple.
It was.
And now you're doing that all the time for everybody. And so how has ESA touched Fresno? You guys obviously meet with churches, you start ministries. What does that look like?
Well, we connect churches to work together. We connect churches with people in need. Basically, ESA is like a broker. We stand at the intersection of 500 churches, of probably 150 or 200 parachurch ministries, and we connect people. So we've been able to start over 50 ministries in Fresno.
Wow.
In the last 40 years that we've been ministering. And Matthew 9 kind of sums up what we do. Matthew 9:35 through 38 says, "Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, 'The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field.'" We've done that for 40 years. We've sent out workers into the harvest field. We've worked with the police. We've worked with the schools to mobilize Christians to make a difference.
Wow, that's awesome. 40 years of good work. Let's go back to that beginning when you're 19 and you worked for Youth for Christ for a while, and then you started ESA. What was that process like? What got you there?
Well, I had grown up in a church that taught the Bible, but they never talked about evangelism. They didn't do evangelism. They didn't tell me I needed to make a decision to follow Christ. And when I went to Youth for Christ as a senior in high school, Bullard High School, they led me to Christ. And 1 year later, after I graduated from high school, I went to work for Youth for Christ for 12 years. Now, that was a real interesting dynamic in my life because I went to Bullard High, which was an all-white school at the time in 1968. Mm-hmm. And then in 1972, when I began Youth for Christ full-time, I began working at Edison, which was an all-black school in 1972, and it remained that way for 10 years. And so it was very much of a culture shock for me. And I learned some things about dealing with prejudice and racism. And that's when people become your friends. They're your friends. It doesn't matter what color they are. Of course, they're black, I'm white, and so forth. Doesn't diminish that, but we're friends. And it was a great lesson for me to be able to realize that racism can be deleted through proximity, through becoming friends.
Yeah. That's amazing. I bet that would be a culture shock, and I bet you both, you as in Edison and you guys both probably learned from each other in that way. The kids that you minister to there and yourself.
We learned a lot because it was a black part of town. To me, it was a black high school, black students, and 3 or 4 months later, it was Darlene and Robbie and Renee and Sue,
cool.
Raymond, and they were my friends. And so that adjective describing them just disappeared, and we became friends. And it was actually, I worked in 5 or 6 high schools. That was the one that was most fulfilling to me.
How cool. Yeah, awesome. I'm sure you got lots of stories there I'd love to hear sometimes.
Matter of fact, I wrote a book about it. It's called Pray and Do the Next Thing. And it's available on Amazon, but it talks about that whole transition. It talks about ESA. It's kind of a description of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Well, for those of you who are interested, find it on Amazon. And what was that again? You said Pray and Do the Next Thing?
Yes.
Great. I'll have to read that too. So tell us the difference between ESA and Love Inc., or is there?
Well, ESA, Evangelicals for Social Action, is our corporate name. And that's our nonprofit name. Love Inc. is our largest ministry of ESA. So you could look at ESA as General Motors, and you could look at Love Inc. as Chevrolet. And then there's also Pontiac, or there used to be Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and so forth. And so ESA is really the corporate name. The reason we call ourselves ESA Love Inc. is because Love Inc. is the main ministry that we interact with churches in Love Inc. And so when I would call a church, I'd say, my name's Alan, I'm with ESA. And they would say, what? And then I'd say, I'm with Love Inc. Oh, Love Inc. Because churches refer people to Love Inc. that are in need so they can be screened and connected to the help they need. Yeah. So we just call ourselves ESA Love Inc.
Great. So I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to say, what are you for? Because I ask every guest that, because that's the name of our show here. But when I say what are you for, what do you do when you connect churches? What are you for with this impact that you have with ESA and connecting the community?
Well, I wrote an article for Christianity Today in 2005. It was called The Largest Company in the City. The church is the largest company in the city. Mm-hmm. I remember one time I gave a talk at Rotary Club, and it didn't look like the people were too interested in listening to a religious guy until I told them that I represented the largest company in Fresno.
Yeah.
And then they all listened, and I told them it was the church.
Yeah.
So we have 500 branch offices in Fresno and Clovis.
Right.
And we are powerful. If we work together, we can make a difference, and we do work together. Through the years, we have mobilized Christians to serve. We have gotten over 100,000 calls through the years to Love Inc., and we've mobilized churches to serve. But we've also had prayer summits for pastors and for Christian leaders. We've had for 28 years, twice a year, prayer summits, one in the mountains, one down here, and we've become very close. We have a lot of unity in the church. Matter of fact, that unity has led to something interesting this year, because we found out that Fresno was the largest city in the United States without violent racial protests. And that's been attributed to our relationships with leaders and a lot of the Black pastors that talked to some of the protesters, and that helped it to be a peaceful protest and so forth. So it's made a difference. We've been able to work with the police to reduce gang violence, to get churches involved with the schools. And in 1 year, we recruited 800 readers for 15 schools to read to children that were below reading level. And so there's so much the church can do. And what we do is look for opportunities and connect churches and Christians to get involved, because faith, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead, it says in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, you just told us that in James. Wow, that's crazy. Now, you've mentioned a lot of what I would consider large numbers, especially for Fresno and your guys' impact. Why do you think we don't hear this on a daily basis, or what do you think the disconnect is with churches trying to motivate their congregations to impact Fresno, at least outside their own congregation?
Well, there's a principle, and it's birds of a feather flock together. And so people that are like one another have a tendency to congregate in a congregation together and be very happy doing church. And you have to be intentional to go. I would not have gone, if I hadn't worked for Youth for Christ, I would not have gone to the West Side, maybe ever. And there would be no reason for me to do that. But I had to be intentional to go over there. And then I found a gold mine when I went there of the people and the students that live there. And so we have to be intentional to go outside our flock, outside our own group. Jesus said the greatest command is to love God and love your neighbor, or love others as you love yourself. And so we have to become intentional to do that. And many times people would say, sure, I love the poor, I'll help someone, but I don't know what to do. We help them know what to do.
No, that's awesome, because that's exactly what this conversation is for, is trying to get the message out there, more of what people and organizations like you do in Fresno that can help impact. And you guys have such a wide reach. You've been around for 40 plus years. You've helped 50 ministries more, and it's really important. And so why is it important? I just explained why it's important, but why is it important that it exists in Fresno? Why is it important that you keep doing the work? What's the downfall if you guys don't exist?
Well, we are organizers. And back in the 60s, when I graduated from high school, there were organizers, and they would organize protests. And do you think there would be a protest if there wasn't an organizer? No, there wouldn't. And so sometimes it just takes someone to connect this person with this person with this person and connect things. I had a meeting one time when we had a lot of crime in Fresno in 1995. We were at a crime zenith. And I called a meeting at the police department with a couple of police officers, couple pastors, victim services, and maybe about 8 or 10 of us. We were going to help victims of crime. And one of the police officers, who was a Christian, said, Alan, if we run the criminals out of apartments, will you run the churches in? And I said, if they're willing to go in, we will. A couple weeks later, we had a city bus, about 6 police officers, 35 pastors. We drove around town and looked at the apartments that had the highest number of police calls each month, because most of the crime was not in homes, it was in apartments.
Wow.
And over the next 6 months, we had 2 uniformed police officers working for a year in our office. And it was called Care Fresno. And in 6 months or so, we had 30 churches going into 30 of those apartments. The owner had allowed one apartment to be used as a center for church activity. And in the next 5 years, crime went down 43% in Fresno, and the murder rate went down to what it was 30 years before. Now, that wasn't all just us, because there were a couple other ministries that started too, but we were part of that. and we made a difference. Do you think those churches would have gone into those apartments? First of all, if the policeman hadn't asked me, and if we hadn't known those pastors and gone on that bus ride and so forth, it wouldn't have happened. So we play a connecting role.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a huge, that can be overlooked greatly. I mean, the fact that you guys were able to do that, and I mean, that 43% in about a year going down in overall crime in those neighborhoods, that's crazy. That's a huge stat. Man. All right. Well, so what do you think we can do moving forward? What do you guys want to do moving forward? What's your next step? How can we impact the city of Fresno? What does that look like for ESA?
Well, we have wanted more and more. It's still the exception for people to leave their church and go out and minister to other places. That's still the exception. So last year, 2 weeks before we were all locked down because of COVID, we started a ministry called Engaging the Church, and we have 17 ministry opportunities for people not to seal envelopes or do mailings, but to touch a life of someone in a ministry or an agency in our community. It's called Engaging the Church. That's on our website. Talking about that, opportunities to serve. They can volunteer at our office, taking those calls.
What does that look like, Engaging the Church? If I were to sign up, what would you have me do?
Well, there's a bulletin insert, and you look and you say the rescue mission needs mentors to do this. This other ministry, Gap Ministry, needs volunteers to visit lonely elderly people in a rest home. So there's just a sentence or two, and if something fits you, you call the phone numbers there, you call them up, you say, I want to do this, and they'll plug you in. It's as simple as that.
Wow. Yeah, that's really great. Why do you think people overlook those opportunities or miss those opportunities? Or do you think churches are, doing their own thing and not handing those opportunities out? Or why do we get the sense, and maybe I'm just out of it a little bit, or I just get the sense that people aren't necessarily jumping at these opportunities, or there's a ton of people involved in this current age? Is that true, or am I wrong?
I think people are selfish. They're self-centered for the most part.
Yeah. Okay.
And when they start to touch the lives of others, it's self-motivating. But you have to step out. If I hadn't met Fred Manchik, this Russian old man, Russian immigrant down on Fulton when I was first married, I never would have seen what a wonderful thing it is to touch someone's life. If I had never met Florence in the rest home, she'd been there 9 years. She had never gone outside the rest home because there was no family to take her. So I was able to fold her wheelchair up one day, put it in my trunk, put her in the car, and go for a drive. You know what that meant to her? That would be like going to a prisoner in a state prison that had been there for 9 years and say, do you want to go to a restaurant? You want to go to a drive? You want to come to my house and have dinner with my family? We have to take the first step. So we try to help Christians take the first step in serving others and ministering to others, and it's self-motivating. You want to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would you tell someone to help motivate them that's kind of on the fence? Like, if I was just sitting here and I was like, you know what, that sounds really good, but I don't know.
Well, I might ask them if they're a Christian, and then I might ask them if they believe the Bible, and then I might ask them if they believe in obeying the Bible, and then I'd start telling them one of the 400 scriptures in the Bible about helping the poor, and then I'd probably have them come with me. I'd probably say, hey, come with me. I'm going to go down the rescue mission. I'm going to go here or there. Come with me. And I've done that before. And people begin to meet other people and begin to plug in, and they find that their life has more significance than they thought it did.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we definitely need more people involved in the city. And I feel like there's a little bit less influence of the church and a little bit less influence of pastors nowadays than maybe there were decades before. And it's really encouraging to see that you guys are still going strong and trying to motivate churches and motivate congregations and do all that. So, but with that, how can we help you guys? How can we help you become successful with ESA? What can the public do for you listening to this podcast?
Well, I would say what you can do for us is not doing for us, it's doing for others, since our mission is to help Christians do things with others.
Right.
You can volunteer at our office, go to our website, get the contact information, volunteer answering the phone calls. There's training, there's supervision there. But you can also plug in and love your neighbors. You can get to know the names of the neighbors around you and begin praying for them, caring for them, sharing the gospel with them as the Lord leads. You can get involved in engaging the church. There's so many ways. You can ask your church, how can you reach out? A lot more churches are reaching out now than were a year ago because the need has been so great. There are churches giving out food that never gave out food before, or giving out clothing, or giving out books to children. Who ever heard of that? But another ministry called ENP helped churches start to give out books and all kinds of things. So there are a lot of churches that are reaching out more than they did before COVID. So you can ask your church, how can you reach out? I know People's Church got a huge trailer and a truck to pull it around. It's called I Love My City, and they plan to go throughout our city, maybe even to some of the farm worker communities in our valley, and bring help to them in the name of Christ.
Yeah. Wow. That's some great stuff. Well, we'll have the list of how to help and your contact on our on this podcast and description notes for everybody as well. Alan, I'm so glad you're able to take some time out of your day to be on the show and talk with me. I want to give you 60 seconds. You've got the platform. Anything you want to say to the audience, what would you say to them? I'll give you 60 seconds.
I would say the word others. One time in the mid 1800s, William Booth, who founded the Salvation Army, they didn't have any money for telegrams. And so he sent one word to all his workers in the world as a Christmas greeting, and it was the word others. If we can think of the word others and ask God to show us what others he wants us to touch, let's reach out beyond our own family, beyond ourselves, and get a pencil and paper, write others on it, and get a magnet and stick it on your refrigerator. As a reminder, there are others there, and those are the ones Christ died for. Yeah,
that's such a good reminder, and it's so simple. Well, that is a great encouragement, Alan. I'm so glad that ESA is doing that. I hope that more and more people get connected with you, and more people consider in their church, and pastors who listen to this, what they can do and how you can partner with them. Because even your example with the police and crime and even other organizations around the church, we have a great opportunity with 500 plus churches, 100,000 Christians registered, or at least in the area. That you're right, we are the biggest business, and we can do a lot for this city and even the surrounding areas. So that's an amazing thing. So, Alan, I just want to thank you again for being on the show. It's just really, really great to have you.
Thank you, Gordon. Appreciate it.
Well, that was such an inspiring conversation with Alan. ESA has been around for 40 years, and they have the same simple message of just thinking of others. I love that last comment of just writing out others, remembering about others, not thinking about yourself. That's what God asks us to do. Love our neighbors and love others. Well, Alan, I want to thank you for being on the show, and I want to thank the listeners for watching and listening to these podcasts. Please subscribe, like, rate, review, all the things you can do to help us get the word out. We truly appreciate it. And if you were moved by what Alan spoke about today and you want to help out ESA and Love Inc. make a greater impact, you can volunteer at their office, you can get involved with your church, and you can also engage your neighborhood with some of their serve opportunities. You can call ESA for more information at 559-244-0105. Their phone number again is 559-244-0105. Or you can go to their website at esali.org. That's esali.org. And on their contact page, you can send them an email. And as always, if you just want to thank our guests, you can send them a digital thank you. You can go to our website at forfresno.com, click on this episode, and tell them how much you appreciate them. Next week, we have another terrific conversation with Dr. Jennifer Smith, the CEO of Link Care, And this time we're going to talk about the pastoral care side of what Lincoln Care does. This is a challenging conversation. You don't want to miss it. And remember, you matter and your impact matters because you are the church and we're here to serve our city.